everybody know that this session is going to be recorded. Going forward, we probably will record the sessions because many times we've had people who have signed up to participate and then for whatever reason they've been unable, and they always ask, was there a recording? So this last time we started doing that, and we probably will be doing that ahead of time. So if you prefer not to ask questions or make comments during the second half when we open things up, you can send them via the chat box, and either Esmeralda or I will read them for you. Also wanted to remind you that just to cut out background noise when our presenters are speaking, I probably will go through and mute everybody just so that everybody can hopefully hear everything clearly. So our topic today is hearing from rural Iowa. And this is one I'm very interested in because when I started looking into sustainable housing, which is a particular interest of mine, what I found out is that not every problem manifests itself in the same way depending on where you're located, but the same problems exist everywhere. There are housing problems everywhere. There is food insecurity everywhere, but the problem may look different and the solutions may be different. So it's really important to make sure that we are aware of what's going on in our own communities and in other communities that may or may not be like ours. So today we have two speakers. The first is Deacon Derek Cranston, and he is, and you'll have to correct me if I get this wrong, but you're with St. Mary in Riverside, Holy Trinity in Richmond, okay, and St. Joseph in Wellman?
Correct.
Okay, great. So he's going to start off for us, and then he will be followed by Pat Finan, and Pat is a parishioner at St. Anthony in Knoxville. So Deacon Derek, if you'd like to go ahead and start.
Sure. Why don't we start off with a prayer? In the name of the Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Amen. Lord Jesus Christ, we ask that you be with us this afternoon as we delve into the issues affecting rural life, that you guide us with a spirit of wisdom and fortitude, and most importantly, that you give us a grace to be your disciples. And together, best we can, let us say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. In the name of Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay. If you can't hear me, raise your hand. Just kidding. So yeah, I'm going to talk about social issues prevalent to rural life. Can everyone see that? I just hit shared screen. No, I didn't. Hang on. I will do that here. All right. Can you see it now? Okay. First of all, I just want to I'm only going to talk for about 10, 15 minutes. And just a disclaimer, I am by far not an expert on this. It is something, though, that is probably close to my heart since I was born and raised on a farm and currently live in what would be considered a rural area. But I'd just like to kind of define what we mean by rural. And these aren't fancy notes or anything, power slides. They're just, so you can look at my notes and not look at my face. But first of all, what do we mean by rural? There is no one size fits all definition to what it means to live in a rural area. There's a lot more diversity than people probably think. People tend to think naturally of, farmers or ranchers when thinking of rural life. While they do make up a big percentage of this demographic, there's truck drivers, factory workers, mechanics and plumbers, electricians, contractors, which are like carpentry, roofing, etc., So those are all occupations you'd find in an urban area. The Hispanic immigrants and seasonal workers play a bigger and bigger role in rural life. So that's the shaping what it means to be rural. And some rural areas are are becoming bedroom communities, and with working from home and Zoom, you may see more and more of that. A bedroom community is where you live in a small town outside of a urban area and just commute back and forth. And I see that a lot in the town where I live, Kelowna, Iowa. We have a lot of parishioners, especially at Holy Trinity, that work with the university, either at the hospital, in academia, and whatnot. So there's that aspect of it, which is going to increase. So you got those two different things, the growing Hispanic community and seasonal workers, and the bedroom community effect. And just a few interesting statistics, talking about rural life. It's estimated that 44% of U.S. military recruits come from rural areas, which just kind of gives you a snapshot of what kind of personality comes out of a rural area, I guess. And many vocations to the priesthood actually come from rural areas. Just off the top of my head, Father James Flattery, Father Kevin Anstey, Father Jacob Greiner, all grew up, I believe, and lived in what would be called rural areas. So it's a good place to grow vocations. Stop me anytime you have questions. What I'd like to focus on, or something that kind of flies under the radar, is mental illness. And then I'm going to segue into how that could possibly lead to substance abuse. When you think of mental illness, there are stereotypes, but when you think of mental illness, you may think of an out-of-control teenager, maybe a homeless person. You usually don't picture a farmer or a rancher, because there's that stereotype of do-it-yourself, being very stoic in life. There's a stigma, but I got some statistics from the Rural Health Information Hub, which was a great source for me. Three things they cite is accessibility, availability, and acceptability. Accessibility, rural residents often have to travel long distances to receive services. And I'm looking at rural as a whole, as in the state and as in the Midwest, because, in Kelowna, Iowa, we're close to Iowa City. We don't have to drive that far, to go to a hospital. But the norm seems to be that, residents that live in rural areas have to travel, up to 150 miles to see a trained mental health professional. And when you have to drive that far, you may be having a breakdown, something like that. You may change your mind halfway there and turn around. Also, rural residents are less likely to be insured for mental health services. Most rural areas have the fewest choices in the ACA marketplace, the Affordable Care Act. So that's the issue of accessibility. Availability, there's a chronic shortage of mental health professionals. Mental health professionals and providers are likely to practice in urban areas. And then there's acceptability, the stigma of needing or receiving mental health care. As I mentioned earlier, you have the picture of the stoic farmer, the do-it-yourself. I don't need any help. Also, when you're in a rural environment or a small town, it's pretty obvious. If you're maybe not really obvious, but words get around in a small town. And if there is a mental health professional, that has an office, they can drive by, see your car parked there, and start talking and whatnot. So there's that stigma of word getting around in small towns, and the lack of trained mental health professionals also creates a barriers to understanding mental health as an illness. There's that aspect of educating and overcoming that aspect, which in turn I think leads to another problem in rural areas: substance abuse. Substance abuse has been long prevalent in rural areas, according to the RHIB. Rural adults have higher rates of alcohol, tobacco, methamphetamine use, and prescription drug use, and heroin addiction is also on the rise in the area. And then, is there a connection from suffering from mental illness and turning to alcohol and drug abuse to self-medicate? Maybe. I don't know what the research is out there. That's just kind of what my little theory is. What I'm seeing is when mental health goes untreated, people will self-medicate, and there seems to be a disproportionate higher rate in rural areas. And can this explain the seemingly high rate of suicide? And I kind of speak from personal experience. My years in ministry, I've been an ordained deacon for 7 years, and before that, I would help out father with funerals. But I've lost track of how many funerals I've done for victims of suicide. And it really got to me a year ago, about a year and a half ago, where a young kid committed suicide on by his dad's tombstone in the cemetery, and his dad had committed suicide 2 years earlier. So, 2 years ago, I'm talking to this poor woman who just lost her husband to suicide. 2 years later, she loses her son to suicide. And it just started to hit me, and I started looking around. A lot of times, if you work in small parishes long enough, you get to know a lot of the families, and it just kept hitting me like, oh yeah, her cousin committed suicide, his uncle committed suicide. They have a friend or relative that committed suicide, and you talk to the funeral home directors too, and they're like, yeah, there's been a lot of suicides, and I don't know what the experience is, in bigger cities or other towns, but there seems to be a high rate of suicide from my own personal perspective. As a matter of fact, I really started to advocate for suicide awareness. I was working with Haley Lynch Rawls, who is an advocate for suicide prevention, education on suicide, and she came and talked to our church when we had the young man commit suicide a year and a half ago. And then I started working with her. I wanted to get her into high schools, Rotary clubs, and that was starting to take off. We went to like 3 different Rotary clubs. She presented, I should say. I'd go with her for moral support. But she's both a survivor of a suicide attempt, and also she lost her fiance to suicide, so she's seen it both ways. But yeah, we got into the Des Moines Rotary Club, which I guess is one of the biggest Rotary clubs in the state of Iowa. Politicians go there to talk. The governor goes there to talk. In their email, they told us how important they were, so I'll take their word for it. And judging by the dinner and everything, it was pretty fancy. But I'm kind of digressing, but that's what I'm seeing, and that's what I guess there are 2 things I wanted to make people aware of in rural life would be the prevalence of mental illness and self-medicating through substance abuse. But there are other issues, such as the impact of the growing Latino community and other areas that Pat may talk about. But those are the 2 ones I just kind of wanted to bring to the table. Resources, I can send these to Amy, and she can send them out to anyone that's interested. There's the Rural Health Information Hub. That's the link for the mental health. The Information Hub for substance abuse. And then this 3rd link is a presentation given by Dr. Dennis Mohat. He is the director of the mental health program at the Center for Rural Mental Health Research. He has like over 3 decades of experience and is a advocate for that. And I'll just since you got my screen, I'll just click on that. Are you guys able to see the website screen? Okay. So yeah, I just thought I would click on that so you could see that. But yeah, that's the two things. If I have the floor to speak, those are two things I would want to make people aware of about living in a rural area. One size doesn't fit all. It's changing demographics, and suicide is high. I think heroin, prescription opioid abuse is high, and mental illness. So, any questions? Okay.
I got one. This is Father Dan.
Yeah.
What's the percentage of our diocese that would be considered rural?
That's a good question. I couldn't tell you that.
You've got 22 counties. You've got 2 major metro areas. 20 of 22. I mean, it is incredibly rural.
Is everybody else finding those demographics true as far as the diversity? I would say I'm 80% agriculture down here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was trying to look as a whole at rural life in the state of Iowa, in the Midwest. Here, I mean, where I'm at, it's, we're close to Iowa City, and I've seen, professors and medical doctors sitting right next to farmers and truck drivers. It's kind of got that bedroom community feel, I think, just because we're so close to the University of Iowa. So it probably depends, it's different in different areas. That's why I wanted to emphasize one size doesn't fit all.
You also intimated that it's the distance from services that causes some of the problems. And I know since I moved out here in July, just having a grocery store no closer than 15, 20 miles away I have to adjust my lifestyle, but I'm wondering if it's more the personality of the person who wants to live in rural America, and that personality contributes to it as much, if not more, than the distance. The geography.
Yeah, I mean, it's not like math where 1 + 1 = 2, where you can point to one thing. I think it's an aggregate of different factors. That was I mean, rural people in rural areas, yeah, they do. That's a part of their life, driving 15, 20 miles to a grocery store or going to sporting events, whatnot. So, while, driving long distance may be part of their livelihood, the danger is, especially when you're suicidal, those, from what I've been told, is those thoughts just overwhelm you. It seems like forever, but when they leave, it's like they're gone. The danger is when you're driving there and you have time to think about it, and you have time to doubt yourself. Do I really need to, spend the money on gas to go see a mental health professional? What am I doing? I'm just going to turn around. Where, here I get on the interstate, I can get, and I'm really upfront with my struggles with depression, and I've written about that in the Catholic Messenger. But I'm like a half hour from my therapist in Iowa City, and if for some reason I had to go to the hospital, I'm not that far away. But I think the issue is the long distance driving is something that is a part of their life, but it could be the individual personality. But what I kept coming across is that it gives them time to change their mind.
I have a really quick question. Because I know you need to get on, but what would anyone want to live in a rural area then for? I mean, it's like there've got to be some positives for people to want to be in these rural areas. So I guess I appreciate the stuff that you pointed out, the challenges, but I think it's maybe we need to talk about some of the positives.
Yeah.
Sure. I'd like to hop in on that too.
Yeah, I didn't want to be all doom and gloom. That's why I wanted to point out, 44% of the military it comes from a rural area. There's that sense of duty. small churches produce a lot of our vocations. You know,
Mm.
our younger priests are from rural areas. I know there's Ben Snyder, he's a seminarian. So there is that sense of hard work and responsibility that I think is instilled into you if you live in a rural area. But you know, I was asked to present on issues that were social issues. So
Oh, no, I appreciate that.
yeah.
We can't hear you.
Amy, you're muted.
Well, that's funny. Everybody, I unmuted everybody and it didn't unmute me. We're gonna, if you want to hold your questions for a moment, I have one that came in by chat and I will bring that one up. But we'd like to give Pat Finan an opportunity to jump in here with his observations, also as to what he's seen in rural communities and farms. So Pat, if you wanted to take it away.
Sure, thank you, Amy, and I appreciate the opportunity. I just very quickly, a lot of you folks on the program here know me. I worked for the diocese for a little over 10 years and really got a great chance to travel to all 22 counties and get the depth and breadth of rural life across the diocese. I also used to work for the Diocese of Des Moines previously and worked there very closely with National Catholic Rural Life Conference when it was based there in Des Moines. It's now based in Minnesota. But I just wanted to, first off, pick up on Barb's question and before I transition to some of my stuff. It's a great question, Barb. Why would somebody want to live rurally? And I grew up suburban and city in St. Louis, Missouri, but chose to live rurally 23 years ago, I guess it's been now. My favorite anecdote comes back from a process that we did in the diocese, probably, oh my gosh, 2003 or so. Some of you may remember we did a parish assessment thing where everyone was supposed to turn in a binder to talk about how their parish operates. And this was at a point where the diocese was looking at the possibility of some parish closures and clustering. And my favorite, one of the most highly functioning parishes at that time was Bloomfield, which was the only parish in its county. And the structure there was so very different. But basically, if you needed something done in Bloomfield at the church, you didn't go through the parish council or the building and grounds committee. Somebody just got a pair of pliers out of their pickup truck, and it got done that, while people were gathering for mass. It was just a very different structure. And I point to that because it speaks toward the community that you'll find in rural communities, that a lot of times, I don't mean to be judgmental, but sometimes it's a very different vibe in I'll just say Bettendorf, Davenport, Iowa City, than it is in some of our more rural communities. And as Derek said, there's not one size fits all. It's not perfect in either area, but I do love the sense of community. I did do some homework on this, largely because and Amy and Kent, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you all, and some of what we're seeing, particularly in Marion County where I live in Knoxville. I'm getting a message here that my internet connection is unstable, so I hope I don't lose you. I live in Knoxville, way out on the west end of the diocese, and I'm a very active volunteer and board member at Helping Hands Food Pantry, which is a recipient of CRS Rice Bowl local funding, which we really appreciate. So anyway, we in Knoxville, we're sort of, to go back to Derek's thing, we defy that sort of one size fits all image of rural life. We have Pella in our in our county, which a lot of you folks know is, you know, a fairly affluent community with a lot of manufacturing and tourism. But we're sort of south of the river, as we say out here in Knoxville, and we have a lot of very low-income communities and people who live out in the countryside who don't have access to, for instance, close nutritional food or services, as Derek has already spoken toward. As Derek was speaking to, I was also, and Father Dan as well, I was thinking about another community in our county, Pleasantville, which some people might say is a bedroom community for Des Moines. It's just a 25-minute drive, but it recently lost its only grocery store, which was on the square. And so now the only place in Pleasantville to get groceries is a Dollar General, which Dollar Generals are popping up all over the place in rural communities all over, including in our diocese. The food there is very hit and miss in terms of nutritional value. The availability of fresh produce is really, again, hit and miss. And I saw Mary Hannah on the line here. She's our local nutritional expert. Maybe she wants to chime in and talk about childhood nutrition. But I do want to speak just real quick about what we're seeing at Helping Hands, and also this strange phenomenon that we have in Knoxville, which is sort of an anomaly, and that is that this is a great problem to have, but we probably have too much food services, like free food, available to low-income people. I realize that sounds probably like, are you crazy? How can you have too much food? But we've especially experienced this during the pandemic. We're at Helping Hands in Knoxville, longstanding food pantry. We've actually seen our demand go down. And I've been trying to wrap my brain around that. And I have a few theories on that, but part of it is that for better or for worse, there's a lot of people who want to be seen in the pandemic, a lot of churches in particular, who want to be seen as serving, you know, and meeting that Matthew 25 call to feed the poor. When were you hungry and I fed you? But right now we have 3 functioning food distribution sites just in Knoxville alone. I did some homework. We've seen our numbers go down. We used to distribute 425 bags of food twice a month. Right now, we're doing more toward about 225. Part of the reason is, like I said, we have a food pantry that's run by a large evangelical, the closest thing you could call to a mega church in our community, that's actually doing more food than we are right now, as well as a program, and this is a great program that I hope that other communities in our diocese have, but we have through our school district, they used to have a USDA-sponsored Backpack Buddies program that they've changed to a food pantry that's actually located in the high school, and in normal times is what's called a client choice food pantry, where people can go in and select the items that they want. Now, because of COVID, they have switched to a drive-through. That bigger food pantry, it's called Crosswalk, they do drive-through. And Helping Hands also went to sort of a both-and approach. I started a drive-through in our back alley, while at the same time we're also maintaining, and it's been a struggle, but we're maintaining a walk-in as well, and trying to abide by COVID restrictions. To speak toward a little bit more toward what we really always try to look for, trying to live with Father Matta's 2 feet of justice and charity, to look at the root causes of why people are in such need. I will say that we have a lot of families, and this is a good problem to have, maybe, but are accessing all 3 distribution centers every month, sometimes twice a month. We have immigrant families. Strangely enough, in our community, we have very large families from Ukraine who have come to Knoxville, and they use our facilities a lot. But to go back to some of what Derek said, a lot of the reasons they come, there is low education, there is addiction, some people with crime records can't be employed. A large number of the people that we serve are indigent elderly. They are 70 plus, sometimes 80 plus, driving in for food. We have seen recently a larger number of younger families who are first timers. Those quite honestly can be really heartbreaking because they've never accessed it, and it's, as you can imagine, there's a dignity issue that comes with that. I do also want to mention some of my other observations and connections. I don't want to dominate too much time because I realize we want to get to some question and answer surely. We also, just as Derek said, we have high rates of suicide in our area. Again, some of it's anecdotal, but I did serve on a community coalition for suicide prevention that formed. I was doing that a couple of years ago, and because of other commitments, I've had to step away from that. There's also a very successful suicide prevention group called Your Life Matters that has been able to raise a lot of money and invest in some speakers, the high school, for instance, who have come in and talked with the kids and done programs. The exact scenario, almost exact scenario that Derek described, we had a suicide about 2 years ago in our community where a young man took his life on, I believe it was his brother's grave, on who was also a suicide. And there's that copycat phenomenon as well. But there's a lot of factors, as we all know, that go into it, that people will lose hope. A lot of factors can play into it. Food insecurity can lead to bad health. Inability to get employment can lead to desperation. A lot of what we've seen in our county, and this is something that was just a phenomenon back when I was really active in National Catholic Rural Life, people would talk about, you don't go to the psychiatrist in your town, you get in your pickup and drive 2 towns over, another county over, so nobody sees your truck in the shrink's parking lot. I do want to mention also in that vein, and I'll just say 2 last things that are going on that are positives in our county. We have a parishioner who is also our county sheriff, and I know through him that there's some very active coalitions in Des Moines to try to improve mental health services in rural areas. And I don't know where it stands right now. I've sort of lost touch with it, but there's been some real active jockeying, I would say, for these local, regional mental health service centers that would serve 4 or 5 counties. So, I know the last I checked, Marion was one of a number of counties that were trying to get one that would serve a wider area that might include Jasper down to Appanoose, who knows, but would put mental health services closer at hand. The other thing, and just to finish off my thoughts for right now, is that empowerment ministry is really important. We have, in our county, we have an agency that's called The Well, which is run by, basically it's funded largely by that megachurch that I mentioned, which was planted by another megachurch over in Pella. And it's a fairly well-funded agency, but they have facilities in Pella, Knoxville. They're expanding now into Fairfield. And my understanding is that there's people across the country that have tried to replicate this model. But it's a faith-based approach to empowerment, taking people who we serve at Helping Hands and asking them, why do you need this food? What's going on in your life? And how can we get you help with social services, addiction counseling, those sort of things? It's really tough to start up, but it's a phenomenon that's out there, and it's something that anybody of whatever faith tradition or not can participate in. But I feel like I've been all over the place, but I have more data if you're interested in terms of what we're seeing in terms of food insecurity that I can speak toward. But I feel like I've been talking for a long time, so I'm going to turn it back to Amy and Kent and see where this goes. Thank you.
Thank you, Pat. I want to go ahead and get to the statement that was made. It wasn't really a question, it's a statement that was made via chat, because mental health has come up in both of your sessions speaking. Someone pointed out that they understand farmers will be working with their tenants September through October to sign contracts for next year. And the farmers themselves talk to their bankers about finances and budgets in January and February. And these are times where stress is at its highest. So I don't know if you see an uptick in the need for mental health services. I guess I always pictured fall as kind of a time where once things are winding down, but that's not the case. That there's not much of a rest period, and they gear up immediately and be thinking and dealing with finances, which is always a
yeah. I think there's like lease agreements for lands, and there's a lot of crop sharing where you rent the land from the land, and yeah, they're due in September and October, and your livelihood depends on probably the two most unpredictable things there are, and that's the weather and the markets. So yeah, farmers, may make a bundle of money one year, but then 2-3 years in a row going in the hole. So there's always that stress, in farming that's always hanging over you. Harvest time can be frustrating if it rains and you can't get in the field, machinery breaking down. Harvest time, it's beautiful. I have a lot of fond memories from growing up on a farm during harvest time, but yeah, there's a lot of pressure there during harvest.
And Amy, to speak toward that, yeah, I mean, the farmers have to get their loans from the bank for all their seeds and inputs, their chemicals, their fertilizer. In the fall and winter months, they're working on their equipment, trying to figure out if they can buy a new or used piece of equipment. As Derek mentioned, it's been a crap weather year. I mean, between the drought or derecho and price instability, we're going to see, I think, a lot more demand for mental health services, and hopefully not suicide. But right now, we don't have for my money, or for, as I see it, the rural support that we need. And a lot of times people are having to go to Iowa City, Davenport, Des Moines for the services that they need.
Okay. Kent, I will get to you, but Barb, I saw your hand wave first.
I get a lot of emails like from the U.S. Department of Agriculture, and they're talking about lots of money going to farmers right now. And so I'm wondering, are the farmers going to be made whole by some of this? I mean, they're talking about billions of dollars that are available for farmers, and they've also got the farm to food box programs and stuff like that. So I'm just wondering, where does that all fit in? And my understanding is too that there's a 95% payback for crops that were lost because of weather or damage. I mean, I do get a lot of emails, so I'm just wondering, is the financial situation that dire? And if it is, I'm totally, want to know that. But I also understand that there's a lot of money going out there right now, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture.
Well, yeah, I mean, the financial aspect of it's a little bit out of my scope. But I would just go back to the unpredictability, Barb. Yeah, you could have, there's crop insurance, and there's grants that are out there, and money comes in. You don't have a lot of cash liquidity though. You have it in assets, but in cash liquidity, you don't necessarily have $1 million sitting in the bank. You might have $1 million in assets,
Yeah.
but as far as, if you're going to have to pay the bills, you might have to sell them. And they're farmers too. A lot of them, not a lot, but some have to work a second job, have to work at a factory or something, and then they just farm outside of doing that second job. So that's kind of the thing too. People, that always kind of bothered me. People think farmers are rich and wealthy. That's not necessarily the case. There's a lot of volatility in their financial situation.
Kent?
Just a couple of comments regarding funds that are available to address issues relating to mental illness and mental health. July 7th, the governor's office announced that $50 million of CARES Act money would be dedicated to assisting the state with mental health, the mental health system. So you've got 10 million that goes to mental health providers, 10 million that goes to substance abuse disorder providers, and then 30 that would go to mental health and disability service regions. So there's money that has been allocated to address those issues. Where all of you come in is providing the input on what the communities experience when 50 million is diffused across 99 counties. Because ultimately, it's the Derricks and the Pats and Johannas and Lee Mickeys and people that are in those local communities who can more specifically address the issues of how it's being realized on the ground in local communities. And our responsibility is to talk with the representatives, either those representing us in Washington or at the State House, to say, this is where it's okay, this is where we've seen some benefit, and this is where we've not. I was on a phone call yesterday with the executive director of the Iowa Catholic Conference and the 3 colleagues of mine that have the much larger Catholic charities in the state of Iowa. And one of the things that the other 3 provide, because they have counselors or therapists on their staff and we don't, because of how things have evolved over decades, one of the things that they talked about is telehealth and mental telehealth. Where both Derek and Pat have talked about needing to go not to the local counselor, but one a town over. There's great thought given to what it would mean to be able to assist people in getting those that are comfortable with ongoing counselor care to be better able to utilize what's available by way of telehealth or telemental health. And one of the conversations that we had was, what would it mean if Des Moines and Dubuque were willing to be slightly more flexible with their service boundaries, such that the border counties that that are near their diocese would also be eligible for that type of support. So that's an ongoing conversation. That's merely one tiny piece of how to respond to it. But ultimately, this lunch, these conversations, is one about awareness as to what is going on. And 2, you got our number, and we want to hear from you in order to give it to the bishops, their chief lobbyist, and whoever you're represented, in order to give them the real-time feedback. So
that actually fits very well, Kent, with another comment that we had in the chat, which is that mental health services are now available on phone calls and Zoom meetings, very private and confidential. And I'm struggling to remember the name of the service. Maybe Esmeralda remembers it. I can find it after we finish, but in the newsletter, the Social Action Office newsletter, and in the Google groups, at least 2 of them, we've posted information about a free service by the state of Iowa, specifically targeting rural areas and offering counseling, online counseling or via phone counseling for free on various topics, addictions, mental health, a wide variety. And so I hope that people are becoming more acutely aware of the need to provide those services however we can. And probably telehealth is going to be our best bet for a while, because the actual building of physical structures and putting people in place in small towns is a much bigger ask.
I wanted to hop in on that, Amy. I feel a little bit out of touch because, yes, we do have the technology, as we're demonstrating right now, to do amazing things without driving anywhere. And thank God for that. I don't know the realities in some communities in the diocese in terms of high-speed internet access and what that plays into. And that certainly is an advocacy issue that, we should keep in mind continually. It's not bad where I live, but other places not so much. Also, it's interesting, I do have a friend who's a licensed mental health counselor who works in a parish down in Florida. And she was telling me the other day that as a practitioner, while Zoom is great from a personal standpoint, she gets what's called Zoom fatigue and has a really hard time providing the compassion that sometimes people expect now when we have this physical interaction. But everybody does have it, well, for the most part, does have a telephone that they can access it. So we are blessed by technology that way. And I just I felt out of touch when you went there, because I thought, yeah, the pickup phenomenon is not so much an issue anymore, or shouldn't be.
I do believe that connectivity is an issue, especially in rural areas. And you're right, that is something that we really need to keep in the forefront and advocate for. There needs to be, if nothing else, the pandemic has driven that point home, both for mental health issues and for education. We need to have that connectivity, equitable connectivity at all areas. Other questions, comments, thoughts? Okay. Esmeralda did find, it's the resource that's provided by the state of Iowa is yourlifeiowa.org. So yourlifeiowa.org, no spaces. They provide counseling and other resources. If you're struggling with addiction, mental health, suicidal thoughts, or overwhelming stress, and they specifically reference the derecho, they have 24/7 help available, and they have a call or text line and live chat. Their phone number is 855-581-8111, or you can text 855. And what I will do is, Deacon Derek has provided the links that he referenced in his portion of his little talk, and I will forward those on to everybody who signed up for this, as well as this information. I think it's a great resource to post at your parishes, on your bulletin boards, maybe put in your bulletins on the weekends. So, Kent?
And additionally, as it relates to rural life, and Pat Finan referenced Catholic rural life, it continues to be a national resource for parishes and dioceses that have a good chunk of their territory being rural life. And as Pat referenced, they were once upon a time, and for many years, out of Des Moines. Their offices, they're small offices, they've moved them to the Twin Cities. Jim Ennis is their executive director. And by way of a messenger article that Barb wrote about the novena for those that had experienced the derecho, we've concluded that novena, but by way of Catholic Rural Life, you can still access it and go through that novena at, when it's suitable for you. And so there again, if your rural community was affected by it, go to Catholic Rural Life and provide that link to the person that's responsible for your parish bulletin. Bishop Zinkula was one of 9 bishops that took his turn at leading a daily prayer. Bob Gruss, Bishop Gruss, originally from our diocese, who's now the bishop in Saginaw, was there as well. And the beautiful part of it is rural life, people watch out for each other. And so when the call was sent out to join in prayer with people that had suffered this storm in Iowa, yeah, you had Iowans. There were 3,200 people that had connected with Archbishop Jekyll's first day offering. And it's not just rural people in Iowa. You get Michigan and Texas, because there is a bond that you find amongst rural people, even from other states. And our Catholic faith is oftentimes very closely connected with the rural living experience. And so Catholic Rural Life continues to be a great ally, friend to us as we try to make sense of all that is rural life. And the other part of it too is we've got a great resource in Deacon Dan Freeman, who upon ordination was given his diocesan assignment to assist with promoting rural life. And I hope too that in the not so distant future, a couple members of our clergy will be afforded other opportunities to learn more about and speak to matters relating to rural life. And that will be great. It also helps that your bishop is a farm boy. And so you take advantage of those lived experiences in much the same way that Derek talked about what that meant for him growing up.
I will include the information about the novena and a link to Catholic Rural Life also. And then I want to make a plug for something that we have through the Social Action Office at the diocese. We have a variety of Google groups. And if you're familiar with Google groups, or if you're not, it's kind of like a group mailing list where there's one address, you send a message, it goes out to everybody in the group and they can read it at their own leisure. And if you respond to the whole group so everybody gets to hear your thoughts. We have one specifically for rural voices. So if anybody has an interest in that one, please let me know. We set up the Google groups because they were a way to, instead of just pushing out information, they were a way to engage in conversations. So if you have an interest in that, let me know and I can send you information on that.
Amy, I think Derek was trying to, had his hand up.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I just wanted to give a shout out real quick to the Diocesan Faith Formation Office and Don Boucher. Mental Health Awareness Week starts next week, I believe, and they've organized a mental illness awareness seminar. I'm looking at my email here. Mental Illness Awareness Week's coming up, and it's an online seminar. So kudos to them for trying to educate people about mental illness, because it doesn't affect.
I'll provide the link to that one as well. That's a great lead, Derek, because it's a week-long series, and so beautiful commercial or PSA.
Anybody else? Well, Deacon Derek and Pat, thank you so very much for sharing your experiences, what you're seeing, and for taking the time to not only speak to us, but to talk with us and answer questions. Everybody, thank you for your participation. Our next Lunch and Learn, I haven't flipped my calendar over to October. I don't know what the first Thursday is in November, but I think it might be the 4th. But it will be a session called What, So What, and Now What? And was that the 5th, or are you telling me it's November 5th?
It's November 5th.
Okay. And the election will have finished, at least the voting will have finished. Counting votes may not. But we're going to probably know who some of our new representation will be. And so we will talk about how to help educate on the issues of importance in our diocese with our representatives. I'll have more information out about that in the newsletter. And then everybody who's participated in this one, you'll get a personal invitation to attend also. Thank you so much for being here today. You all are what make these Lunch and Learns so valuable. And I hope everybody has a great October.
Thank you.
Thank you.